that she's on a mission, keeping our culture lifted. Now you can watch and listen to Tammi Mac. Tammi Mac. Oh, what show is that? It's the Tammi Mac Show on Fox Soul. Tammi Mac, Tammi Mac, yeah. Ooh, that Tammi Mac, Tammi Mac, hey, so you know it's Tammi Mac, hey, Tammi Mac.
Welcome back to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Hey, everybody. Hello. Good evening. I'm Tammi Mac. And, you know, it's Friday. So, Coalition in the house. We've got Dominique DePrima, renowned radio personality and activist. She's out there on the front lines. And of course, Alicia Cooper, who is our comedian extraordinaire. She makes every deep topic so funny you can muster it. And then Ed Sanders, he just brings us all home and lets us know the middle of the road, you know, what should be done. He's not too left, not too right, you know, he's just in the pocket. Hey, y'all. Hey, y'all. Just in the pockets. So good things happening for you, Dominique. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, well, thank you. I have accepted a new position at a brand new Black-owned, all-Black talk radio show in LA. It's KBLA Talk 1580. It's owned by Tavis Smiley. And I'm going to be the first African-American woman to have her own talk radio show on commercial drive time radio in Los Angeles. So I'm making history, which I'm really excited about. I'm going to be on 6 to 9 weekdays in LA, 1580.
Congratulations, Dominique.
Congratulations. Thank you. I'm really excited about it.
If you want conservative guests from the Commonwealth, from the heartland.
Absolutely. Come on, Dr. Oleka.
To fight with.
We're going to have someone from Kentucky.
I'm sure many of your listeners will say, Kentucky, is that some small town in the eastern part of California that I've never heard of? I don't.
Are you saying we're ignorant? Is that what you're saying, Dr.
I'm saying that, unfortunately, if you're not from Kentucky, you've probably never been there. So you may not know where it is or what it is. But I will.
Thank you. Hopefully it'll print it. Welcome back to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Please excuse the technical difficulties. Sometimes it happens when you're living in a virtual world. I'm sure everybody is familiar with that. Hashtag Jeffrey Tobin. According to BuzzFeed, the Congressional Black Caucus appears to be blocking Republican Congressman Byron Donalds from joining the group. How does this help to advance Black issues across partisan lines, especially issues like police reform? Partisan lines is a policy debate that the caucus is working on. So, Dr. Oleka, let's talk about this.
Well, it doesn't advance the issue of police reform. It doesn't advance any issues across bipartisan lines when you lock out a very prominent Republican representative. Look, Byron Donalds is well liked within the Republican caucus. He is a supporter of President Trump. And so if you have someone like him on board to have good conversations with regard to police reform, other issues that impact our community, then what can happen is this. The House sends forward to the Senate a bipartisan package that the Senate can then support and then the president can sign. But if you don't allow Black voices who have conservative perspectives into the conversation, then effectively all you have is a partisan bill and you don't get a whole lot done. And then we're stuck holding the bag. The CBC has a responsibility to allow Republican Byron Donalds into the caucus. He wants to join. So it's really them who's holding this process up.
Ed?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of assumptions there. I mean, and the first one is that Congressman Donalds actually has something positive and insightful to add to the conversation. You know, I would agree with Dr. O.J. Oleka that, you know, you can have partisan debate. There is a perspective from the conservative side that is valuable. I don't think that's what's coming from Congressman Donald. You know, I think he is there to make let's call it a minstrel show out of, you know, anything that happens with the CBC. He's heard their points. He can make his comments and speak to the issues publicly. But, you know, as far as being a serious participant in the CBC, that's not what he is.
Dominique?
Well, and I think to Ed's point, what is his purpose in joining the CBC? Dr. Oleka, I know you're kidding. You've got a great sense of humor. If you're saying to me that one congressman, one Trump supporting congressman is going to come in and suddenly we're going to have bipartisanship and we're going to sing Kumbaya and pass a police reform bill, give me a break. Not one single Republican in the Senate supports this bill, not even in the House. So that's a bunch of BS. My question would be, Congressman, why do you want to be in the CBC? You're not really making good faith efforts to have any kind of bipartisan legislation. Is it just to be there trolling us? If so, I wouldn't want him there either. I can see the argument for, we should let every congressperson in. That's because they're Black and they're in Congress. But I need to know why you want to be in here. Because if you're just about wasting my time, nope.
See, Tammi Mack, this is the problem that Republican Black voters and, quite honestly, nonpartisan Black voters have with some of these legacy institutions in Congress. Byron Donalds is a former member of the Florida General Assembly. When he was a member of the General Assembly, he was a member of their Black caucus. Byron Donalds, as he will tell the story, grew up in Brooklyn. He's a 42-year-old Black man who has experience with a lived Black experience. We're going to say that that's not enough to be a member of the caucus? And look, he didn't make this a story. This was BuzzFeed who broke it. It's the CBC who won't let him in, even though he was a member in Florida. Of course he's coming in with good faith. I think it's pretty ridiculous to assume just because he is a Republican that he in fact wouldn't be a good member. Let him in the organization and let's find out. I think he would be good. I think the CBC is making a mistake.
Good faith means that you're willing to consider something. Good faith means that bipartisanship means you will actually give and take. Republicans this cycle are not showing that in any way, shape, or form. Mitch McConnell has said that he wants to block the Biden agenda. And that's clear that that is happening in the House and the Senate. And when you talk about establishment or traditional, congressional bodies, the Senate is one of those, and they've shown zero bipartisanship on the Republican side. Bipartisanship isn't just for rich members of Congress. It also means bipartisanship among the American people.
Alicia, is he just going to be the spook who sat by the door?
Pretty much. If Black Card Revoked was a person, it would be him. And like everybody said, what is his reason for wanting to be a member? And right now it doesn't seem like it's pretty. I feel like he's going to be a mole. And time will tell. I mean, I don't even know if they're going to let him in, but I don't know why at this point he wants to be a member. He hasn't really even given any real good, solid, salient reasons.
His reason that he is a Black elected official who cares about Black people just from a conservative perspective. I think it's such a fascinating thing. No one asks the Black members of Congress who are Democrats what their reason is. They just happen to be Democrats. I think it's an absolutely ridiculous thing to assume out of hand that this Black man who was a member of the state version of this caucus for some reason doesn't want to contribute to the advancement of his people. It's absolutely outrageous. It's silly and ridiculous.
So why would we keep Black people out of the Congressional Black Caucus? For what reason?
Great question.
They're disruptive to the operations of the caucus. I mean, that's the fundamental point. And that's the point about, him being a serious member of the caucus.
So is it that Black Republicans are not allowed to be members of the caucus?
No, it's not that he's a Black Republican. It's that his presence is disruptive. He's not coming to the table with anything productive. He's really there to troll, and as you brought, he's Trump's Black Republican. That's what he is, and he's there to play in the social media. He's there to play in the media and try to cast aspersions on serious policy debates. But he's not there to offer anything serious.
Well, speaking of Black, according to The Root, after President Joe Biden's landslide victory against a former President Donald Trump, for those who believe that, some states started changing voting rules to make it harder for Black people to vote. Now, the thing for the project, or the People Act rather, the For the People Act was an opportunity for Biden to try and make things right. And West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who is a Democrat, was not with it. Is it possible that Manchin believes that senators getting along with each other is more important than our voting rights? Would Manchin vote no simply because the bill lacked bipartisan support? Or is this nothing more than white supremacy at its best?
Yeah, I think I think you call it what it is. Joe Manchin is in West Virginia, and he's definitely played the moderate role. I don't even like that term. What he really is just backstopping. Some of the more conservative members in the Republican Party. He's the backstop in the Democratic Party. I wish we actually had a 51-49 majority so that you didn't need his vote. But I think what's really clear is the logic of needing bipartisanship to enact voting rights or protect voting rights is flawed, because what you really have is one party moving very quickly to try to restrict voting rights, and that's not being done in a bipartisan manner. And so if a party has to stand up for voting rights against the other, perfectly okay with that.
Joe Manchin makes me think that there could be some low-key Republicans running for Democratic positions pretty soon, so that they can just kind of infiltrate the Democratic Party. Not a bad idea, and it seems like something Republicans would do, coming out of this administration that we've had.
Well, I mean, Tammi, I look at it like this, and you can really put these two ideas together, the first topic and this one. Again, if you had bipartisan support that came out of the Congressional Black Caucus that had both Black Republicans and Black Democrats that passed the House, this then becomes a much more difficult proposition for Joe Manchin not to support. But look, Joe Manchin is his own man. I mean, he is West Virginia through and through. He was a former state representative. He was a Secretary of State, former two-term governor, and now he's in the Senate. He doesn't owe anybody anything. And look, Democrats better be careful, because they sit here and act like Joe Manchin is a Republican. He votes with Democrats most of the time, except on these bigger bills. But if you keep pushing a guy like that and he switches over to Republican, then all of a sudden you don't have the Senate. Then Mitch McConnell is the majority leader again, and we get to be on offense. So again, Democrats, be careful what you say about Manchin.
No, and this is a fundamental debate that we have to do as Black people, right? Be careful. Don't make Joe Manchin mad. Joe Manchin needs to earn our respect as a community, and he needs to side with our issues. And that a lot of what we talk about on the show is getting our community to understand that we don't need to be pushed to the back of the line. And that's what Joe Manchin is doing here. And yeah, you've got to hold him accountable for that. And that's fine. We could press him if he wants to vote Republican. If he didn't vote for this, then he is a Republican in our book.
And the fact of the matter is, you're making it sound like this is some big ideological thing that he has. He wants to win. He is a Democrat from a conservative state. So that means he is going to be conservative. He's pandering to his voters. He's pandering to the so-called independents and the moderate Democrats, and let's face it, Republicans. And, Dr. Oleka, you're right. He does vote with Biden.
I'm going to go to some soulmates. I'm going to go to some soulmates real quick, because they're weighing in on this.
Okay.
When did you finish your point, Dominique?
Well, I was just going to say that, if he doesn't ever vote the way
I'm here, but I'm not sure if you all are here.
We need to on Black issues, then, he might as well be a Republican.
So Jason Bourne says Manchin is a whole Republican who took the opportunity to gain a seat by running as a Democrat. Manchin has showed us who he is time and time again. He's a whole conservative. Kind of like I said, will some conservatives start running for Democratic seats here? Is this a tactic?
Well, I mean, again, Joe Manchin has won statewide elected office some 6 times, and he's done it every single time as a Democrat. I think what you're finding, Tammi Mack, is that the Democrat coalition is mixed up of a lot of different people ideologically. You have liberals, you have progressives, you have leftists, but you also have people like Joe Manchin, as Dominique pointed out. He's from a state like West Virginia. Culturally, it is very conservative. So you have to ask yourself the question, if you are a Democrat, do you want Joe Manchin with you 80% of the time when your majorities are very thin and very slim? Or do you, as a Democrat establishment, I'm not even talking about Black voters and Black people specifically, but as a Democrat establishment, do you want to push him over to where he becomes a Republican? Because then you don't set the agenda anymore. Then Mitch McConnell does, and we do as Republicans. So it's a question that the Democrats in elected office have to make.
Alicia, but again, you want to chime in? Go ahead, Ed.
No, I was going to say, but again, I mean, not to repeat my point, but to do it, the 80% that you're referring to, the 20% where he's not voting Democrat, those are generally the issues that are most important to African Americans. And that's where this becomes problematic. For us, if he were to switch Republican, it doesn't show a difference for us. Voting rights is essential to our well-being in this country, and to not stand up for that is shameful. Sorry about that, Alicia. Go for it.
No, I was going to say what you said. Where it counts is where he's not voting with us, and those issues, he's a dino, so it's not helping us. Like you said, it's the African American issues where we need his votes the most, and the stuff that's the most fundamental to us. So I'm not feeling Joe Manchin.
I'm not feeling these commercials either, but we got to take them. We'll be right back on the Tammi McLeod Show on Fox Soul. Welcome back to the Tammi McLeod Show on Fox Soul, where we have Dr. O.J. Oleka with us, Dominique DePrima, Ed Sanders, and Alicia Cooper. Let's get into it. The largest public school system to fall in line with conservative efforts across the country to regulate classroom instruction of American history. I think I must have skipped over something completely. I'm going a little crazy today. On Thursday, the Florida State Board of Education voted to ban teaching ideas related to critical race theory, making it one of the largest public school systems to fall in line with conservative efforts across the country to regulate classroom instruction of American history. Now, this is crazy. So critical race theory, for those who don't know, is a concept that seeks to understand racism and inequality in the United States by exploring and exposing the ways it affects legal and social systems. So several groups, including the State Teachers Union, opposed the rule, saying covering up history would be a disservice to students. Not only a disservice to students, but a disservice to American history. Tell history as it was, not as you want to write it. Dominique, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is censorship. It's the hypocrisy of the Republican Party that's unbelievable. They talk about, they want to have their rights and they don't want the government interfering on them, but yet they're going to censor a 360-degree truth-telling, critical thinking based instruction about American history. And also, they're along the way, they're distorting what critical race theory even is and trying to make it seem like it's something hateful when it's really just teaching people to analyze the function of race in our society. It's ridiculous, and I hope we can roll this back.
We live in America. We don't want people thinking. We let the media and the politicians tell us how to think. That's why we watch TV and vote in these politicians, so we don't have to think for ourselves. Come on now, Dominique. Alicia?
Yeah, this is all, again, upholding the system of white supremacy. It makes no sense. It wasn't anything mean or mean-spirited. And a lot of the parents that had so much issues with it didn't even understand what it was. When you watch people come on the news and they try to tell you what they're upset about, they can't articulate it. All they say is it's going to make white people feel like they're racist and white kids feel like they're bad. And white kids weren't even born when this stuff was taking place. It's just history. And you shouldn't have to go to college to learn the real history of the U.S. And that's ridiculous. And a few small people shouldn't be able to make the rules for the majority.
Well, you're undoing 400 years of history here. Critical race theory has often taught us that Black people are bad. And now you're trying to tell the people that the white people bad. Come on now, y'all rocking the boat here. Y'all rocking that slavery boat here is what you're rocking, Ed.
Yeah, it's like in 9/11, we'll never forget slavery, get over it, right? I think we've all seen that meme running around social media. And, the assumption here is that when you talk about critical race theory, that the assumption is that the country has a problem with race. Now, we know that it does. That we can look at all of the laws that have been passed, the formation of this country, the Civil War, the reasons for it, it's there. And you can't gloss past that. Because it makes you feel uncomfortable. There's all sorts of things in history that make people feel uncomfortable. Being able to study, analyze it, and figure out how to become a more perfect union is part of the journey that we're on.
Oh, I like what you did there, Ed. Dr. Oleka likes that too.
Well, there are a lot of things actually I don't like about this. And I mean, look, I've studied critical race theory in my doctoral program. I know it very well. The challenge that we've got here is that this conversation has become more political than actually educational. There is a portion in which I agree with Dominique in that critical race theory is a concept, it's an idea. It's actually not even what we're discussing here. It has been used now as a political tool. The actual source of the issue that conservatives and folks on the right, and quite frankly, a lot of black parents have, is this 1619 project. This is where the animus originates. It's this idea that our country started and founded in 1619 and originated entirely around slavery, that the revolution, the American Revolution, was based entirely upon slavery, that this is the crux and the context of the country. And I think where conservatives are pushing back is saying, if you're going to teach our kids about history, and Governor DeSantis said, look, we need to know about slavery, we need to know about civil rights, and I agree. I think we also need to know about Jim Crow, we need to know about segregation, we need a full and total history of our country. But what is happening is that you have folks on the left who are using opportunities like the 1619 Project to get white children to hate themselves, to get black children to hate this country. And what is happening is that you will have a generation of people who do not believe that our country can get better. I don't think that's a good way to build community. I don't think that's a good way to build a country. And that's why I would be against these things. But it is unfortunate that critical race theory is being pulled in because it is something very different than what some of these folks on the left are trying to do.
But how do you get white children to hate themselves? We always hear white people say, y'all weren't slaves and we weren't slave owners. So now how are white children now being taught to hate themselves if they weren't slave owners?
Well, look, I think it's an excellent question. I have a good answer for you. I was a teacher. I think the difficulty here is that when you start to begin with the premise that America is fundamentally flawed because of the institution of slavery, and it is because white people enslaved black people through chattel slavery, when you do that with young people, with people who are 13, 14, 15 years old, whenever the curriculum would be taught, you put them in a position to believe what they teach you and tell you. It's the same way, as Tammi Mack pointed out, if you only tell the story of our people from the perspective of being enslaved, then you create this belief within the minds of black folks that as far as we have existed, we have been enslaved. We all know that that's not true. So what I'm suggesting is that you actually tell the full story and you say, this was a period of American history that resulted in a number of very difficult, awful things that are impacting us today. But what you can't say is that we are a country that cannot get past our original sin, which is what a lot of these folks on the left are trying to do. Again, that's not critical race theory.
You're advocating totalitarianism, Dr. Oleka. You're saying we don't have any ability to teach our kids to love themselves or love their country. White kids get the message all day from every commercial, book, movie, and everywhere else that they're the greatest and they're the best thing ever. So I doubt they're going to suddenly start hating themselves. So what you're advocating is totalitarianism and censorship because we're afraid that white kids might feel bad and we won't love our country enough. That's bullcrap. I know.
I'm always dumbfounded by how when something affects white people in a negative way, we immediately need to find a solution for it. But when it affects black people, it's kind of null and void to want to rid of the problem. I mean, the fact that the reason, and this is my first time hearing that this is the reason why people don't want critical race theory to be taught, because white people might feel bad about themselves. That doesn't even make logical sense. In order for white people to ever feel bad about themselves, there'd have to be another 400 years on the books to put them in that mental space.
No, that's not my perspective. So let me make it crystal clear. What I'm saying is that if you promote an ideology and an agenda that comes from the 1619 Project, because that's what we're really discussing here. Again, people call it critical race.
What about the 1619 Project is problematic?
When you talk about the 1619 Project, and what's problematic about it is that it says that the American Revolution was fought because the colonies wanted to keep slavery. It focuses on 1619 as a specific year when the country was founded, which is not true. It focuses on 1619 as a specific year when chattel slavery began, which is also not true.
It doesn't say that's when the
What it
country was
does
founded.
is
It
it
says that's
creates
when
a
the country
fundamental-
started, because that's when black people were brought here. It doesn't say that's when the country started.
But this is my point, Dominique.
No.
This is my point.
You're
If
distorting
you
it.
start at 1619, it does a couple specific things. One, this is not the beginning of chattel slavery in the United States. The Spanish brought chattel slavery to the land of America, we call the United States now, sometime in the 1500s. Also, when you look at the country in terms of its states in 1776, With the Declaration of Independence, that is a different date that looks at the hopefulness of what the country could be. You're not going to hear me deny, obviously, the importance of 1619 as a year that matters significantly, profoundly for the history of where we are currently in this country. But what I'm saying is this: for Black people specifically, if you create a curriculum that says that in this country, your purpose here was slavery, the wealth here was built upon your back only, and there was no fundamental way to get beyond it.
But no one's
what you are doing is you are
saying that.
creating a narrative where
That's a
Black
straw
people will
man.
not like this country.
That's not critical race theory. That's a straw man.
That's
Yeah,
what
I
I
mean,
said at the
and no one
beginning.
is saying
I
that in the
said from the
history.
very beginning
Ours
that
is
that
the
wasn't
history of
critical race.
overcoming that. We're sitting
I said at
on
the very beginning.
on Foxhole right now as evidence that we've overcome that dark history.
Precisely, and this is what I said, and I'll repeat it again. This is not critical race theory that we are discussing. We all agree on that point. What I am saying is that if you create a curriculum for young people,
which no one is
focused in
doing,
1619, that says that if you are Black, this country is irredeemable and does not love you, you are creating a scenario where you're going to have a separate group of people that believe that this country is not for them. That's just not something I support.
Yeah.
We already
Nobody's saying that.
have a separate group of people who believe this country's not for them. I don't think we need critical race theory to tell Black folk that this country's not for them. You can just go try to buy a house and discover that. You can go walk in the store and discover that when somebody start following behind you, or when they make you pay first, but then they don't make everybody else pay first. Let me go into the chat room if y'all don't mind. Ooh. Oh, okay. This chat room. Okay. Jason Bourne. There are over 6 million different news sources in 2021, and people unfortunately have the opportunity to validate and feel validation wherever they want to go for news. CM Williams says America is looking more and more like Russia and China. How do y'all feel about that? Interesting comment, I thought.
Well, I mean, they're right in that regard. I mean, when we start talking about, taking out critical race theory and limiting what sort of thought you can have in this country, yeah, you are starting to become more totalitarianism and more like Russia, more like China.
You agree with that, Dr. OJ?
No, I don't. And I would encourage people, if you feel like this country is becoming more totalitarian, I encourage you to go visit a totalitarian country, or actually hear from people who have lived in those countries. My mother is one of them, who came from Nigeria, where there was a massive civil war because of what was going on there. Look, we have a lot of challenges, we have a lot of problems, but you live in California, a lot of soulmates do, or you live in a different state than Florida. What's happening in Florida is not going to happen in California. It's not going to happen in Kentucky. That's the beauty, actually, of the American system, is that if it happens in one state, it's not guaranteed to happen in another. And it's very difficult, as we just described, for it to happen at the federal level. So you should feel good that we're not Russia or Germany in the 1930s, because we're not.
Except when you start to think about
all you want to,
voters
but
being restricted.
I should feel good that I don't live in Nazi Germany. Is that your argument?
Well, the soulmate said that America is like Germany and like Russia. So yes,
were you here
should
on
feel.
January 6th? Did you see the fascists storming the Capitol, trying to stop democracy?
And did they stop it, Dominique? Did they stop it
We
like
don't
they
know
did in
yet.
Germany?
We have to see what happens with this voter suppression. We don't know yet.
It was just a protest, just a small, simple.
Right, a tourist attraction day.
The vice president.
Alicia, you haven't said a word. Go for it.
I'm just enjoying this. Y'all done tore this daggone thing up. I want to hear what the soulmates got to say. Forget what I got to say. No, I feel like that it's ridiculous. Like, let people learn the ugly truths of this country. What we have is Black History Month every year, where they teach you about Rosa Parks, Dr. King, and Thurgood Marshall. It is ridiculous. It's time to go deeper. It's time to be more honest and let this country live up to its ideals. Dr. O'Lake, I don't agree that they're trying to teach anything about hating yourself and things like that. It's just a deeper dive into the realities of what really happened and all the lies that we've been taught throughout the years. It was okay when the lies were making us look bad or making us look a certain kind of way. But now that the truth is about to be revealed, it's a problem. I don't understand that. I really feel like it's not American for you to tell people what they can and cannot learn about. as long as what they're learning about is actually factual.
Okay, I'm with that. Incog says critical race theory forces white people to be accountable on a public forum. They don't want to be put on blast for their atrocities. They like being hidden. Dr. Oleka?
Well, I mean, I'll repeat what I said is that we're not actually talking about critical race theory. I mean, I realize that's what all the media headlines say. I realize that's what
So
is
what is
put
the
out in a lot of these
discrepancy
bills.
here? I would like, what is the
Yeah.
discrepancy here, Dr. Oleka?
What did
Well,
they
What
remove
should
from
it be
Florida?
called? What should it be called?
Well, the discrepancy, again, I think the way, Tammy, you described critical race theory is accurate. It is a pedagogical way to look at the world. The academic term is it's an epistemology. Basically, it's a worldview. But what actually is happening, again, in classrooms, if you look at the history, the past couple years of why state legislatures are looking to ban different types of teaching, it comes from the 1619 Project. It's why I keep bringing this thing up, which is what we just litigated before. There are some folks who believe that we should start the origin of the country and look at the context of history in the United States explicitly through the lens of race. That's what the 1619 Project does. If that's what you believe, fine. I don't believe that. I don't think it's going to be beneficial for our country, not because of the hurt feelings of white folks, but because if you have a historical narrative, again, as you've pointed out, we've had before in the past, but if you have a historical narrative that seeks to uplift or demean different races based on a particular narrative of history without telling the full context, which we all agree you should do, then you're going to run into a situation where black children and white children do not feel positive about themselves and their countries. Because here's the other aspect I think that's important. Nobody on this panel, except for me, has actually been a teacher. So when you're talking about being an educator and having to implement this in an honest and good faith way, your ideologies will seep into the classroom if this is the curriculum that you're given.
Parents, and we
Yeah.
have to deal with what teachers teach our kids, and our kids are perfectly capable of critical thinking.
Yeah.
Listen,
Yeah.
again,
You don't own
with
you don't
all
own the
due
ability to say
respect,
I'm the teacher.
with all due respect,
We've all been
my good
mentors,
colleagues on
parents.
this panel, because I think this is important for everybody to understand, particularly the soulmates.
But
I'm
what
not
you're
demeaning
saying is
parents. What I'm
ridiculous.
saying is that if we're talking about this in a practical perspective, because this was the question, how is this actually going to be given to kids? I think every single person on here who has kids, they're all great parents. What I'm saying to you is that if you put teachers in a classroom and you give them this curriculum,
But there is no
1619
such
Project curriculum
You're
specifically,
making that up.
ideology.
Yeah.
Let's take
You
a
really
quick
are.
break. Let's take a quick break and come right back on the Tammy McLeod Show on Fox Soul. The National Football League announced that it would halt the use of race norming when determining eligibility for concussion compensation. Now, race norming is a practice based on the assumption that Black people vary in predictable ways from alleged biological and cultural norm that is white. And it's been contested in the NFL settlement since 2018 and was brought to wider attention this year by two retired players. The settlement used two different standards, one for Black players and one for whites. Well, of course, America is two different Americas. So, of course, there are two different rules for two sets of people. But they use that to assess the degree of cognitive impairment and compensation. Now, under the practice of race norming, retired Black players were assumed to have lower baseline levels of cognitive function than retired white players. Black men had to demonstrate more impairment to receive the same compensation as their white counterparts. Are we not tired of this? Like, are we not tired of this? Where do we stand? I mean, I don't even understand how anybody could differ when it comes to this topic. But let's go. Let's see where y'all at. Alicia, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just blatant racism. And we know the top of all the sports. You know, people think sports isn't racist because it deals with statistics and things like that. But sports is very racist, especially who's at the top. And that whole whole thing about the race norming, come on. So what they're trying to say is Black people were born slow, so they can't even tell when we get jacked up. That is the rudest stuff I've ever heard. That is blatantly ridiculous. And what I wish had happened is I wish when it really started that the white players had stood up and said, this is not right. We are white. We see what you guys are doing to our Black brothers on this field. They're getting injured just like we are. We shouldn't get paid and they don't get paid. We are not superior to them. And I think that we need allies and stuff like this, because it looks like we're always complaining about stuff, but we have valid reasons why we're complaining. And that's absolutely ridiculous. These guys are clearly getting hit in the head. They're not making it up. It's a very violent sport. You can see the aftermath of what's happened to them. They didn't come in the sport like that. So how are you using this to not pay them out like you should? I'm very offended.
Yeah, I don't follow sports as much as Dr. Oleka and Ed, but I don't think that there's a white player with enough chutzpah, with enough balls, no pun intended, to become an ally for Black men in sports. It's barely. I mean, it's very difficult for Black men themselves to speak up for themselves in the NFL. It's a very difficult sport to be a part of and to have a say in, like basketball is. Ed?
Well, no, I disagree. I mean, during the Black Lives Matters protest, I'm thinking very particularly about Chris Long, Howie Long's son, and the way he stood in support of the Black Lives Matters movement. You know, this one is as troubling as it gets, right? And we were just having this discussion on critical race theory. And this plays right into it, because to Alicia's point, you have to understand the role of race in professional sports. You have to understand the role of race in measuring medicine. I mean, I can remember studying and learning how the medical association in this country, the leading medical association, used to measure Black intelligence against white intelligence by filling skulls with buckshot. And then, okay, the white skull held more buckshot, so white people had to be more intelligent than Black people. They used a whole number of silly theories to advance their intelligence over African Americans. And what we're seeing here is the vestiges of that playing out in a way to advance resources to white players and restrict resources to Black players. And what's troubling is that there are actually people that calculated this using the model. I wish they would name names on who were the people that were actually calculating these payoffs, because they should really be ashamed, personally.
Yeah. Dominique?
Well, we know that the concept of race norming was created because they said they were trying to compensate for the environmental factors that were impacting Black kids scoring lower on certain tests because of their access to education, nutrition, because of all the stress factors that they had in their communities. So they were trying to create a level testing kind of ground. But what's ironic about it, this double-edged sword ends up being used against us to keep tens and maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the hands of deserving Black workers. Those workers are NFL players. And we think of NFL players as making tons of money, but the average NFL player has a very short career, and they're not all superstars. Most of them are, if you average it out over a lifetime, they're really not making that much. They deserve to have, health care, and they deserve to be paid if they've been impaired for life. And I'm glad that they're changing this policy, but I think that they got a lot more changes to enact in the NFL before we're anywhere near equity. What about coaches? What about ownership? And the list goes on.
Dr. Oleka, have at it.
Tammi, there are a lot of issues that can be debated with regard to the Black community. This is not one of them. This is one of the worst things that I've seen in terms of professional sports, that this would be going on for so long. I think that Dominique pointed it out in terms of what the hope was, but even that I think is flawed. This idea that you are less capable because of what you didn't have access to as a kid with regard to your brain, cognitive function and ability with regard to what could happen to you on the football field and how that can relate to your finances. But the layered aspect of this is not only the financial portion that was pointed out, obviously the racism that's very evident and clear, but think about a lot of players, Black players, who might have thought, well, I'm not going to get the money based on this policy, so I'm not even going to attempt to prove that I had a concussion or to prove that there was head trauma. So now you're talking about long-term health implications that could have been prevented had they gone forward, had the policies been equal. I'm glad that they're fixing it, but I just think about all the players and all the families that had to suffer as a result of a terrible, terrible policy.
I just have to thank social media because some of these issues that are coming out, and I'm sure there are white people all across America in their living rooms going, well, what do Black people complain about every single thing? Because there are more and more issues that are coming out now in terms of how slavery has affected America. And when I think about, you talk about the buckshots, Ed, I think about how they say Black men are more athletic because they were bred to be that way, and how Black women feel no pain. I mean, there is a plethora of things that America has put onto Black people to dehumanize us. And I think this is just another one of those things. And to also, of course, make us less than and make us inferior to the white race. We're going to take a quick break, y'all. We'll be right back on the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Welcome back to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Let's end this night with something very positive, uplifting, and just something that's going to make your heart melt and smile. A commercial pilot gave a touching speech when his father joined him aboard their first flight together before. Take a look.
Oh. This is my first flight with him, so I tried to hold the tears back. I didn't think I'd cry, but this is a very special and a very important flight to me. This is the first time that I've flown with my father.
Did he say this was his first flight or the first time that he'd flown with his father?
I think he said both.
Because I don't know if I want to be on that plane. It's the first flight for both of them. I don't mean to make a nice human interest story negative, but I'm like, I would be scared as hell on that flight. I remember when I was on a plane and there was a father-son pilot. There were father-son pilots aboard, right? And when the pilot got on, he said that it was his last flight. So he was rounding his last flight, and he was taking his last flight with his son. And his son flew with him on his last flight. And I thought, I'm safe. This gonna be a good flight right here. I can kick back and relax. This is last flight. His son is on it. Ain't no danger happening on this plane right here. So yeah, I go ahead, Alicia.
Yeah, he's been a commercial pilot for 10 years. That was the first time he's flown with his father.
Okay.
And I thought it was a touching story. Black dads matter. This was awesome. And I'm just glad, like you said, nobody's fighting. These people have been fighting on these flights lately. I think it's because they lowered the number of direct flights. So now you done doubled your chance of these crazy people getting on these. They like, I got to get back up in the air. I'm about to go to somebody's head.
It's a lot. It's a lot of people fighting on these airplanes now.
A lot of people fight. Too many layovers.
Yeah.
Too many layovers. And Southwest is the worst.
This is his first flight with his father. This is extremely touching. And we do love, Black fathers matter in this. This was a beautiful, beautiful moment. I mean, it brought him to tears. Ed?
Hey, there's few professions where I really don't want to see you emotional before you go do what you have to do. I'm all for Black fathers, OJ, Black fathers. We do what we need to do to raise our families. But man, I sure hope if I'm sitting in the stands or in the seats there, pull this together, guy. You got to fly this plane with me in the back. Love your dad.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. This is what I always think. You have a son on the plane with his father and vice versa, right? They both are going hard for one another.
Yeah.
So nobody wants to see that's a plane that ain't going down, because ain't nothing like a mother and a father's love. That's how I feel about it. So yeah, he has some tears shed, Ed. We do hope he pulls himself. Put yourself together.
And I think you'd be safe on that flight because he had his precious cargo on that particular flight. I think he was all right.
He was focused. He was dialed in.
He was focused.
Yeah, he ain't letting nothing happen to his son. Dr. O'Laker?
I think it's a beautiful thing. I was a part of an organization in college called Collegiate 100. It's the college version of 100 Black Men. And what we would always say is what they see is what they'll be. So the fact that you had this young man who was with his father is because his father told him that this is what you can be because you've seen me do it. And so the fact that you've got the second generation of black men in flight, I think is a beautiful thing. I don't know if that man has children, but hopefully his kids go on to do something like that as well. And I'm excited for them.
I always feel comfortable when they're black pilots for some reason. I don't know what that is, but I feel like I'm gonna get there safe.
Yeah.
With a black pilot. You know, they don't get too stressed out. They don't know how to handle stress levels, you know. Dominique.
They know how to fly upside down.
That, you know, for a black man to become a pilot, they have put him through his paces. They're not just going to throw him up in the cockpit. He's well qualified. So I agree with you. I feel safe too. I love this video. I love it when we go viral for something positive, powerful, loving, and accomplished all together, some black excellence. No more videos of black people being shot and killed, more videos of fathers and sons and mothers and daughters doing great things. That's what I want to see.
I love that. And that, what a way to end the week. Thank you, Dominique. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Dr. OJ. And thank you, Ed. Dominique, we wish you well in all of your new endeavors that life is about to lead you on. And we appreciate you continuing to be with us every Friday here at Fox Soul. Until Monday, everybody, it's a blessing to be in your box. Bye, y'all.